Hello friends, today you're going to learn about the animals of the saltwater habitat. In the previous lesson, you learned about the freshwater habitat. Well, what is freshwater? Pause and talk. Freshwater is water that animals and people can drink because it has very little salt in it. Now, let's share about what you learned about a freshwater habitat. How is the climate in the freshwater habitat? Pause and talk. The climate varies because fresh water is all over the world. How about the water source? Pause and talk. We learned that rain or melted snow and ice make up fresh water. What about the ground? Pause and talk. In the freshwater habitat, there's land by the water's edge, but mostly are covered with water. Are there any plants? Pause and talk. Yes, they are. We learned about water lilies and cattails. Can you name some animals as well? Pause and talk. There are many animals that live in the freshwater habitat. For example, turtles, beavers, rainbow trout and other fish, bullfrogs and other frogs, ducks, geese, and snakes. Finally, let's talk about some adaptations. Pause and respond. One of the adaptations would be the water lilies having large leaves. They have large leaves so they can float on the water's surface and take in lots of sunlight. Fish have gills for breathing underwater. Dragonflies have long wings for hovering to catch food. Ducks have waterproof feathers and large webbed feet for paddling. Today, you're going to learn about the other water habitat called a saltwater habitat. Say it with me, saltwater habitat. You actually learned about one particular saltwater habitat when you studied the Arctic Ocean. Take a look at this map. For many years, only 4 oceans were recognized: the Arctic, Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian. They're all saltwater habitats. However, some years ago, the Southern Ocean, which lies along the coastline of Antarctica, was designated as the 5th ocean. Now listen carefully to find out more about oceans and saltwater habitats. Welcome to the last habitat that we are going to explore. In the last read aloud, we explored freshwater habitats. Now we're going to learn about another kind of water habitat, a saltwater habitat. Saltwater habitats, as you could guess from their name, contains lots of salt. This means that we can't use salt water for drinking. Would you like to drink a cup of salty water? No, thanks. Check for understanding. What did you learn about salt in the history of Earth? Pause and respond. We learned that salt is a mineral found in the earth and can be used for food or to help melt snow and ice in the winter to make roads safe. It's hard to imagine, but more of the earth is covered in water than is covered with land. Most of that water is salt water in oceans and seas. Oceans are huge areas of salt water that stretch all around our planet, and they are home to almost half of the world's species of animals and millions of different plants. The water in the ocean comes from rain as well as from rivers and streams that flow into the ocean. Seas are smaller areas of salt water that have land around them or around part of them. I've come to the largest ocean, the Pacific, to show you a bit more about ocean habitats and the plants and animals that live in them. I'm standing on a beach looking at the water. You can see that the waves are crashing onto the beach. This beach and any land that runs along the ocean is called a coastline or shoreline. Now, you may think that when you are standing on the land looking at the water, that the land stops where the water starts. It certainly looks that way. But let me get my trusty scuba gear out and walk into the water. Now that I'm here, I'm still standing on land. It's just that the land is under the water. The land slopes downward the farther I go out into the water, which means the water is getting deeper and deeper. The interesting thing about the ocean floor, which is the land under the ocean water, is that it isn't flat. As on land, the earth beneath the ocean waters has both mountains and valleys. Mountains are areas of land that are very high where the land comes to its highest point. Valleys are areas of lowland between two areas of highland. This makes some areas of water in the ocean deeper than others. The Pacific Ocean is full of both plant and animal life, but not all of them share the same space. The conditions under the water are very different in various spaces. Some parts are deep and some are shallow. Shallow is the antonym or opposite of deep. In other words, not deep. There are cool parts and there are warm parts. Some are dark and some are full of light. There are plants and animals in nearly every part of the ocean, some in the deep open waters far from the land and some in the shallow waters closer to the shore. Some animals, like turtles, jellyfish, and crabs, live closer to the shore where it's shallower and warmer. Some animals like it better near the surface of the water, and others prefer to live down at the very bottom of the ocean on the deep ocean floor. They have all had to adapt to the conditions of their habitat. For instance, the animals that live in the deeper parts of the ocean have had to adapt to total darkness because the sun's light just can't reach that deep. Some fish, like the devilfish, have very large mouths and sharp teeth so that they can catch their prey as easily as possible. Other sea creatures have feelers on their bodies that help them feel where their food is. And some animals make their own light with special chemicals in their bodies, like when you carry a flashlight in the dark. I have now arrived at a special part of a saltwater habitat called a coral reef, which is made up of many tiny animals called corals. Corals stay in one place all their adult lives. They have stomachs and mouths and even skeletons. These skeletons can be on the inside or outside of the coral animals and are also called coral. When the coral animal dies, its skeleton remains in place and other coral animals will come and live on top of the old skeletons. The colony in which the coral lives is called a coral reef. So, a coral reef has both coral animals and the skeletons of those animals. I'm here in the Pacific Ocean at a coral reef. In addition to the coral, there are many other kinds of animals around a reef. I have found everything from fish and shellfish to octopi and sharks to snails and turtles. Octopi is the plural of octopus. One octopus, but many octopi. Here's an animal that lies in and around this coral reef and whose name most of you can probably guess based on its shape. It's a starfish. This starfish, also known as a sea star, has 5 arms which make it look like a star. Although it is called a starfish, it's not actually a fish. It belongs to a group of animals that have a spiny skin all over their bodies. If I touch the starfish, I can feel that its body is covered with tiny hard bumps that help protect it from other predators, such as sharks, manta rays, and other fish. What is a predator? Pause and talk. A predator is an animal that eats other animals. Starfish are also able to protect themselves in another amazing way. If another animal actually catches and bites off one of the starfish's arms, the starfish will not die, and it can still escape. In time, a new arm will grow back to replace the missing arm. When an animal regrows a missing body part, it's called regeneration. What is it called? Regeneration. The starfish doesn't swim. It crawls very slowly along the ocean floor using hundreds of tiny tube feet. These feet attach to whatever the starfish is crawling over. As it crawls along the floor, the starfish is always on the lookout for food. This starfish's prey includes fish, snails, clams, oysters, and crabs. Here is another animal that lives in salt water. This shellfish is called a lobster. Lobsters live on the ocean floor in openings between rocks. Their hard shell stops most other animals from trying to eat them. Lobsters have many legs that they use for crawling about, and they use antennae on their head to feel their way along the murky ocean floor. I have to watch out for that lobster's claws. They are called pincers, and they're very strong. The lobster uses them to defend itself against its prey and to catch and crush its own food. Lobsters are carnivores. They eat fish, worms, and other shellfish. I'm going to move out of the way of this lobster before I get squeezed. Looks like I moved right into the path of another predator. This is a hammerhead shark. If you take a look, you can see how the hammerhead got its name. Its head is very thick and it looks like a hammer from above, with an eye and a nostril on each end. The hammerhead shark is a large fish, growing up to 20 feet long and weighing over 500 pounds. That's about the same weight as 10 first graders. Hammerheads like to live in warm waters, so they are mostly found near the coast where the waters are shallow and warmer. Sharks are carnivores. The hammerhead's favorite food is a fish called a ray, but it also likes to eat octopus, lobster, crab, and fish, including other sharks. Most sharks have smooth and slender bodies, which help them to swim fast. Their mouths are full of sharp teeth to help them catch their prey. Let's go back up to the surface. There's a sea animal I'm sure you'll want to see, but we have to travel farther out to the sea away from the coral reef and into deeper water to see it. This amazing creature is the biggest animal in the world. It's a blue whale. Blue whales have blue-gray skin and are covered in a layer of blubber that helps keep them warm in the frigid ocean depths. What is blubber? Pause and talk. A blubber is a layer of fat that some animals have under their skin that keeps them warm. Blue whales are so big that they can weigh as much as 25 elephants. In fact, blue whales are the biggest animals known to have lived on Earth, even bigger than dinosaurs. The blue whale spends all its time living in deep water, but unlike fish, it can't breathe underwater because it does not have gills. It needs to breathe air just like we do. The blue whale can hold its breath and stay under the water for as long as 30 minutes before eventually coming up for air. It breathes using blowholes on the top of its head. Sometimes, when it does come up for air, it breathes out a huge fountain of water from the blowholes. Blue whales are carnivores. They eat lots of food to build up their blubber during the summer months when food is easy to find. Blue whales eat teeny tiny sea creatures called plankton. The plankton that blue whales eat are small shrimp-like shellfish that are about the size of your little finger. It's incredible to think that the biggest animal on Earth eats one of the smallest animals on Earth. The ocean is so huge and deep that we could spend all year looking at the plants and animals that live there and still not see them all. In fact, there are still many living things in the ocean that people and adventurous rats have not even discovered yet. I hope you enjoyed learning about the animals in this saltwater habitat in the Pacific Ocean. We still have one more stop to make on our worldwide tour of habitats. I'll see you next time. Check for understanding. How is a saltwater habitat different from a freshwater habitat? Pause and talk. We learned that the water in a saltwater habitat contains salt, which is not suitable for people or animals to drink. Also, saltwater habitats are in oceans, which are very large bodies of water, whereas freshwater habitats are in much smaller bodies of water like ponds, lakes, and rivers. Now I think you're ready to answer some questions. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You're going to pause each time. Try to respond in a complete sentence. Let's say you don't know the answer. Don't worry, you can play my video, listen to my response, and try to answer it again. Okay, let's get started. Question 1. How would you describe the ocean floor? Is it flat and level, or does it go up and down? Pause and talk. As you can see from the picture, the ocean floor has slopes. It goes up and down. And it's similar to the land outside of the oceans. It also has mountains and valleys. Question 2. Describe the types of animals that live in this saltwater habitat called the Pacific Ocean. Pause and respond. We learned about the starfish, which is shaped like a star, a hammerhead shark, which its head is shaped like a hammer. We also learned about a lobster that lives on the ocean floor. Number 3. What are some of the ways that animals have adapted to the Pacific Ocean saltwater habitat? Pause and talk. They're animals with large mouths and sharp teeth to catch prey. Also, some animals have feelers to find food in the dark. There are also animals with special chemicals in their bodies to make light. What animal is this? Starfish eat fish, snails, clams, oysters, and crabs. Is the starfish a carnivore, omnivore, or herbivore? It is a carnivore. You heard about starfish and regeneration. What does regeneration mean? Pause and talk. Regeneration means that it can regrow parts of its body. How is the Pacific Ocean saltwater habitat similar to the Arctic Ocean saltwater habitat? Pause and respond. They are both saltwater habitats. Then, how are the two saltwater habitats different? Pause and talk. The Arctic Ocean is too cold for many creatures to live in for a very long time, and it is covered with lots of ice, whereas the Pacific Ocean has many animals. In the read aloud today, you heard, the conditions under the water are very different in various places. Some parts are deep and some are shallow. There are cool parts and there are warm parts. Some are dark and some are full of light. Say the word shallow. If something is shallow, it is not deep. The water in the mud puddle is shallow. Can you think of places where you have seen shallow water? Pause and respond. The water in the puddle is shallow. What's the word we've been talking about? The opposite or antonym of shallow is deep. Listen to the following examples. If I describe something that is shallow, say, that is shallow. If I describe something that is deep, say, that is deep. A cup of water, that is shallow. Measuring down to the bottom of the ocean, that is deep. A baby pool, that is shallow. Bathtub, that is shallow. Digging down to the inner core of the earth, that is deep. Here is the saltwater habitat poster. Before we move on to our writing, think one or two things that you learned about the saltwater habitat. Please write saltwater at the top. Then, write one or two sentences about what you learned about the saltwater habitat. Finally, you can drop pictures to go with your sentences.